You wake up already tired. Your mind starts racing before your feet even touch the ground. There's a list of things to do, deadlines to meet, goals to chase. You push yourself through the day, fueled by caffeine and pressure. At night, you collapse into bed but can't sleep. Your thoughts won't let you. This is not just exhaustion. It's a quiet kind of destruction. And the most dangerous part? You've been taught to believe this is normal. Modern society has programmed us to believe that constant activity equals worth. That if you're not being productive, you're falling behind. That rest is laziness. That slowing down means you're failing. We wear our busyness like a badge of honor, pretending it's a sign of success. But deep down, there's an ache. A sense that something's wrong. Carl Jung, one of the founding fathers of depth psychology, warned us about this very thing. He believed that when we spend our lives constantly doing, we disconnect from the most important part of ourselves, the inner world. Jung didn't see the human psyche as something that could thrive under pressure and overexertion. Instead, he saw the soul as something that whispers, not screams. And if you're always in motion, you'll never hear it. Many people are terrified of stopping because they don't know who they'll be without the noise. Busyness becomes a mask. It hides the emptiness, the unresolved traumas, the inner chaos. We think we're escaping our pain by staying busy, but we're actually feeding it. What we refuse to feel doesn't disappear, it simply waits. And when we finally slow down, all of it rushes to the surface. Jung taught that the journey to wholeness requires us to face what we've been avoiding. He called this process individuation, the integration of the conscious and the unconscious, the light and the shadow. But individuation doesn't happen in a rush. It doesn't happen through achievement. It begins when you stop running. The tragedy is that most people only begin this journey when they're broken. When the burnout becomes unbearable. When the relationship ends. When the body collapses. When the illusion of control finally cracks. That's when the soul speaks. That's when you realize you've been doing too much for too long, and none of it brought you closer to yourself. Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And isn't that exactly what we've been doing? Filling our time, our minds, and our lives with noise, just to avoid the silence. But silence isn't the enemy. It's the door. In the quiet, you start to feel again. You begin to hear the subtle voice of your intuition. You reconnect with your emotions, your truth, yourself. You begin to understand what actually matters, not what the world tells you, but what your soul longs for. Stopping isn't easy. In fact, it can feel terrifying. But it is only in stopping that true transformation begins. You cannot meet your authentic self while sprinting through life. The parts of you that are starving for attention can't be reached through performance. They are waiting in the stillness. The more you do, the more disconnected you become from being. And being, according to Jung, is where real meaning lives. In the next part, we will explore what begins to happen, psychologically and spiritually, when you make the radical choice to stop overdoing and instead start being. The moment you stop is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is quiet. So quiet that it can feel almost foreign. There is no applause, no instant reward. Only silence. And in that silence, something begins to stir. At first, it feels like discomfort, restlessness. You may feel like you are doing something wrong. Your nervous system, so used to constant stimulation, doesn't know how to respond to stillness. This is completely normal. You have conditioned yourself to survive on overactivity. Slowing down feels unnatural because your identity has been tied to your productivity for so long. But if you stay in that stillness long enough, something starts to shift. Your mind, which once felt like a battlefield, begins to quiet down. The anxiety starts to lose its grip. You start noticing things you never had time to see before. The way the sunlight falls on the floor. The sound of your own breath. The weight of your emotions that you had been suppressing begins to rise. This is the point where most people get scared and go back to doing. Because when you stop, you finally begin to feel all the unresolved pain, the sadness, the anger, the grief. They surface. Not because they want to hurt you, but because they want to be acknowledged. Carl Jung called this the confrontation with the shadow. The shadow is the part of yourself you've rejected. The traits, emotions, and memories you've buried. It's everything you were told not to be, or everything you didn't want to feel. When you are always busy, you keep the shadow locked away. But when you slow down, the door begins to open. And here's the truth. This is not a bad thing. It is necessary. Jung believed that healing comes from integration, not avoidance. You cannot become whole by denying the parts of yourself you do not like. You must bring them into consciousness. You must see them, understand them, hold space for them. When you stop overdoing, you create space for this process. Space for the real you to emerge. Not the version of you that performs. Not the one that pleases or proves or chases. But the version of you that simply is. That exists beyond achievements, beyond roles, beyond expectations. Emotionally, you begin to reconnect with your heart. You may cry more. You may feel waves of emotions you cannot explain. This is healing. It is not a breakdown. It is a breakthrough. Your body is releasing years of suppressed energy. You are no longer running. You are listening. Spiritually, something even deeper begins to awaken. Jung believed that each person has an inner self that holds the blueprint of who they truly are. This self is not created, it is discovered, and it speaks in symbols, dreams, and quiet intuitions. But it only speaks when you are willing to listen. Stopping is the first step to hearing that voice. And when you hear it, you begin to realize how far you had strayed. You see how your constant doing was a way to avoid the truth of who you are. And now, standing still, that truth begins to return. You do not have to have all the answers. You do not have to figure it all out. But you do have to stop. Because in that stopping, the real journey begins. The journey not outward, but inward. In the next part, we will dive into the process of inner reconstruction. How your identity begins to change, how your values realign, and how the old self starts to fall away to make space for something far more authentic, the person you were always meant to become. When you stop doing too much, a subtle unraveling begins. You may not notice it at first, but something within you starts to shift. The old patterns, the roles you've been playing, the masks you've worn for so long, they begin to lose their grip. And with that, a quiet crisis of identity can begin to unfold. You start asking questions you've never dared to ask before. Who am I when I'm not being productive? What is my worth if I'm not achieving anything? What do I truly want, beyond what others expect of me? These are not comfortable questions. They pull the ground out from beneath your feet. You might feel lost, unmoored, like a stranger to yourself. But according to Carl Jung, this loss of the false self is not a failure. It is the beginning of transformation. Jung believed that every person wears what he called a persona. The persona is the social mask we present to the world. It's how we fit in, how we play our part, how we survive. But the danger arises when we mistake the mask for our true self. When we identify so strongly with our roles, worker, achiever, caretaker, provider, that we forget the person beneath. Stopping all the doing brings the persona into question. And when the persona cracks, something deeper starts to emerge, the authentic self. This emergence doesn't come easily. Jung warned that the path to individuation, the journey of becoming whole, is often accompanied by a symbolic death. The ego resists. The mind tries to hold on to what's familiar. You might feel like everything is falling apart, but in reality, everything that is not you is falling away. Emotionally, this period can feel like grief. You may mourn the person you used to be, even if that version of you was burned out and unfulfilled. You may feel fear as you stand in the unknown. This is part of the psychological death-rebirth cycle that Jung so often described. The death of the false self is painful, but it's also sacred. In this space of undoing, your values begin to realign. You no longer crave what you once did. External validation loses its shine. You start to question your ambitions, your relationships, your priorities. You no longer want to impress, you want to feel. You no longer want to win, you want to be whole. Spiritually, you begin to notice a quiet presence within you. A wisdom that doesn't come from books or mentors or society, but from deep inside. Jung called this the self, the central archetype of wholeness, the source of true meaning and inner guidance. When you stop, you begin to align with this self. You begin to make decisions not from fear or pressure, but from intuition, from inner clarity. You also start to see life differently. What once seemed urgent now feels trivial. The constant noise of the world no longer pulls you the same way. You find joy in simplicity. You begin to crave depth instead of speed, silence instead of stimulation, connection instead of performance. Of course, there will be moments when the old self tries to return. The temptation to overdo, to overcommit, to seek approval will still arise. But the more you listen to your inner voice, the stronger it becomes. And the stronger it becomes, the less you feel the need to pretend. This process is not linear. There are moments of clarity and moments of confusion. But each step into stillness brings you closer to who you truly are, not the version of you that's been shaped by pressure and performance, but the one that has always existed beneath the noise. This is the rebirth, not a return to what you were, but the emergence of something entirely new. A life rooted in authenticity, a mind that values stillness, a soul that refuses to be silenced by busyness. In the final part, we'll explore how to live from this new place, how to maintain this inner alignment in a world that still demands more, and how to protect your peace, your energy, and your truth, without falling back into the cycle of overdoing that once kept you from yourself. You've stopped running. You've faced the silence. You've endured the unraveling of your old self and touched the quiet, enduring presence of something deeper, your authentic self. Now comes the real challenge. How do you live from this place of inner truth in a world that constantly tries to pull you back into noise, pressure, and performance? Carl Jung understood that individuation, the journey of becoming whole, is not a one-time realization. It is a continuous act of courage. Every day, you are faced with choices that either honor yourself or betray it. The world will still expect you to play roles. It will still tempt you with productivity, success, and validation. But now, you are different. Now, you know too much to go back. This is where the true work begins. It is not about rejecting society or becoming passive. It is about showing up in the world without losing yourself in it. You begin by creating boundaries, not just with other people, but with your own patterns. You learn to say no to what drains you, even if it once made you feel important. You protect your energy like it's sacred, because it is. You stop overcommitting. You stop justifying your worth through what you accomplish. You no longer let urgency dictate your direction. Instead, you listen inward. You make time for stillness, not as an escape, but as a source of guidance. You no longer chase what doesn't resonate. You slow down enough to recognize what feels alive inside you and what doesn't. Your calendar no longer defines your value. Your inner alignment does. This shift affects every part of your life. In your work, you stop striving to be everything to everyone. You focus on depth over volume. You begin to create or contribute in ways that feel aligned with your soul, not your insecurities. Jung believed that meaning doesn't come from external achievement, but from living a life that expresses the truth of who you are. You don't have to be perfect. You have to be real. In relationships, you begin to show up more authentically. You stop performing. You stop pretending to be okay when you're not. You allow yourself to be vulnerable, messy, and human. You no longer bond over shared busyness or mutual burnout. You seek connection that honors truth, not image. You start attracting people who are drawn to your presence, not your productivity. Your inner world becomes your compass. You start interpreting your dreams again, listening to your intuition, paying attention to the quiet signs the world gives you. Jung emphasized that the unconscious speaks in symbols, images, and feelings, and when you're no longer numbed by overactivity, you begin to understand its language. But perhaps the most powerful change is this: you become okay with being. Not being busy, not being productive, just being. You sit with yourself in silence and no longer feel anxious. You look at a quiet day on your calendar and feel peace, not guilt. You stop measuring your days by how much you got done and start measuring them by how present you felt. You begin to experience life not as a race, but as a relationship with yourself, with others, and with something greater. Of course, the world won't understand this at first. People may question you. They may say you've changed, and they'll be right, you have. But your task is not to please the world. Your task is to remain loyal to your inner self. Jung believed that the most damaging thing a person can do is to live a life that is not truly theirs. When you live from your wholeness, you not only heal yourself, you create a ripple effect. You become a presence that helps others remember who they are too. You don't have to fight the world. You just have to stop abandoning yourself. This is not about doing nothing. It is about doing what matters. It is not about avoiding responsibility. It is about taking responsibility for your inner life. It is not about rejecting ambition. It is about redefining success on your own terms. You will still have goals. You will still work, love, create, grow. But now, everything you do comes from a place of presence, not pressure. You move with intention, not impulse. You act with clarity, not compulsion. And when the noise of the world gets loud again, as it inevitably will, you will know how to return to yourself. You will have built an inner sanctuary, a space the world cannot touch. A place where your soul speaks, and you are finally willing to listen. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That privilege is now yours. You've stopped doing too much. You've remembered your wholeness. Now, you begin again, not as a machine in overdrive, but as a soul awake. So take a breath, return to your center, and remember, you were never here to perform. You were here to live.